Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff. Um,
Okay, great.
Welcome to the world of technical difficulties. Stephanie, can you see my screen okay?
Yes, I can see it, Jeff. Thank you.
Okay, cool. All right, well, good. Was there anything else you wanted to say before I jump in?
No, just welcome and thank you for volunteering to do our session today. I'm super excited. I was reading a little bit on your website yesterday about the people-centric, and so I'm excited to learn more. Thank you.
Okay, cool, good, well, good. Thank you guys for having me here. I'm happy to do it, and have had a little bit of exposure to Aparo over the last several years now, I guess. And great organization, full of great people doing great things for other great people. So it's a privilege to be here. So what I was asked to chat about today, and I think I'm part of this series. I'll have a few more in the coming months. But this idea of how do we stay productive and how do we stay people centric as our world is kind of changing around us. And although we may be kind of coming out, we still don't know what the future is like. So, you know, it's a pandemic, it's a post-pandemic world. We're telecommuting. And so what have we learned so far? And maybe what are some things we can learn from others who've made some of this transformation before all of this started to happen that we can apply to ourselves? That's what I was going to speak on today. And to do that, I like to go back. And today I want to go way, way back in time to another transformative time in history, but that has a lot of similarities to today. So the year is 1840. The Industrial Revolution is still in its early stages, but cities are really struggling with growth. So if you didn't know this, as populations were burgeoning in cities because people were flocking to them on the promise of jobs and a secure future for them and their families, they weren't really equipped to handle the population explosion in those cities. And so you look at something like Baltimore, and Baltimore looked like it was poised for success. 1840, Baltimore was the second largest city in the United States of America. I didn't know that until recently. Really cool fact. Um, Chicago, Illinois, by contrast, was this little podunk hillbilly frontier town. It was something like a number 73 in terms of size, and there were probably 75 cities at the time. So not a very big city in the United States. But as they looked at the struggle, I mean, literally the term the unwashed masses came from this time. Cities were so overrun and so dirty that if you came from the part of the city where 85% of the population lived, into the part of the city where the upper crust lived, they could literally smell that you were not from around there. You were part of the unwashed masses. You can imagine the disease and the social unrest that was causing as a result of that. Infant mortality rates were abysmally high. There's a lot of things that people were struggling with. So Chicago made a crazy decision at that point. At a time when cities weren't funding things like this at all, Chicago was actually the first city in this country to invest in a comprehensive sewage system. So they said, we see what we think our people are going to need. We're small enough, we're not really struggling with it yet, but we're building a foundation for the future. And you can actually see how Chicago and Baltimore's growth rates changed. But Baltimore kept going on and on. Look, Baltimore looked at it and said, we're secure, we're in a port city, we're near the capital, we're near New York City, our future looks bright. And besides, we've got this legacy infrastructure that we'd have to kind of move around to build this out. So we're just going to wait and wait and wait. And Baltimore, Maryland, was the last city to install a comprehensive sewage system. And you can see what happened to the trajectory of both of these cities as a result. It literally made history by doing this. Now, I literally shared this presentation up in DC, and a woman who worked for the Baltimore sewage system happened to be there. And I thought, oh boy, I hope I got my facts right on this. And she kind of said, you know what, that still permeates our culture today. We do not take care of looking in the future to say, what do our people need? How are we going to support them? And it's still crumbling, even though we were late to the game. So what's our lesson learned, right? When cities don't change with their citizens, bad stuff happens. But we're going through our own time of trial right now. So we're all trying to figure out, our society is changing, the people we exist to serve are changing, the people who work for us are changing. What are we going to do to keep up with change? So quick introduction to me. I get involved in what I call digital people engagement, and my story with all of that starts on the nonprofit side. I was a Young Life kid, if you've ever heard of Young Life, and it made a huge impact on my life in high school and thereafter in college. And so I went into it saying, this is it. This is my calling. I'm going to work for this organization. And I got into their two-year internship program straight out of school. And I found I connected really well with leadership who was struggling to use digital to create better relationships. And I really helped enhance what they could do. But I also found I wasn't the same kind of superhuman leader connector that these other people were. And so my story kind of changed as a result of that. And I said, this is what I'm attracted to. I'm not going to be doing Young Life for the rest of my life, but I am going to be focused on how can I help people go broader and deeper with people using digital, not to replace the human touch, but to augment it, to do more than we could do if we didn't have digital helping us with it. So that's what I do. That's kind of my geeky work stuff that I love to do. And I spend a lot of hours doing it. I've written books and that kind of stuff. And here's the reason I do it, right? Here's all the other stuff about me that is the much more important stuff. My wife and I are recent empty nesters. Our 2 grown daughters. Seems like recent, but now it's been 3 years since the younger one and 4 years since the older one got married. And so we love the empty nest stage. Every stage is better than the last. Empty nest is a ton of fun, but our hearts were a little empty. So we added Verdi there. She's our new empty nest coworker. There she is sleeping in her COVID hive right next to my desk now. So right down there is where she spends most of her day, right next to me while I'm working. And she's part Chihuahua, part Pit Bull. I'm told that was a very ambitious Chihuahua. We love drinking wine. We love riding a Harley-Davidson motorcycle together whenever we can. And we just became grandparents about 2 months ago. So that is Theodore Evergreen Tremolini. He's a thrill to have around too. Okay, so that's the fun personal side stuff. So we're all talking about transformation now, right? And we've been talking about it for a long time. All of our business has been thinking about this digital change we need to undergo long before COVID hit. But COVID has now brought up a lot of new questions, right? We don't know what the future is going to look like. Before we could wait. Now we feel much more of a sense of urgency, but we're still struggling with how fast do we go? How slow do we go? What changes are going to be permanent? What's the future workplace going to look like? How we attract and keep the right people? How we be relevant to our customers and the other people that we exist to serve? And so, yes, we all want to go from this slow, cumbersome caterpillar and transform into this beautiful, agile butterfly, but we struggle. And what we often do in that struggle is we say, there should be an easy button for this, right? And I can tell you, people have been pushing the easy button for years. They buy something, whether it's called Office 365 or the G Suite or a CRM application or whatever, and think, install that, and now we'll be doing digital collaboration. And they click that button, and they click that button, and they click that button again. And if you're one of the people who's had it delegated to them to click that button, you might think, maybe it doesn't say easy on that button after all, right? I can't tell you how many people I show these 2 slides to, and I get this revelation of eyes open and going, you mean other people feel that way too? Absolutely. Look, it wasn't easy for Chicago. Baltimore tried the easy path. It didn't work for them either, right? And here's what the real reality of this is. Forbes magazine tells us 84% of these projects struggle or fail. So it's not easy. It's going to be a struggle no matter what you do. It's not a straight path. If it were easy, believe me, the folks who could sell you software would have made it easy by now. They're making it as easy as they can, but it is a transformation. If you're going to the health club to get into shape, it's not easy, right? Transformation, by definition, is not an easy exercise. In fact, if you look at the real transformation from caterpillar to butterfly, it's incremental. It leaves you kind of exposed and vulnerable sometimes. You're going through some uncomfortable things. And what we found the reality is that when we're trying to be more people first with digital, that's a lot different from legacy technology projects. When we're worrying about accounting and operations and things like that, that could be very straight-laced. People is very fuzzy around the edges, and technology and the way we do it has to work differently. So that whole realization, starting from when we started nearly 20 years ago, led us on a journey. And it was a very humbling journey for us in many cases. We, like many companies, thought, wow, our clients seem to like us, our projects tend to end well, so we must have figured this out. We knew there were fail statistics out there, but we thought, ours seemed to be going good. But then we started looking in our own rearview mirror, and we didn't like what we saw all the time. 2 or 3 years out, we would say, well, that thing that felt like it ended well, it's struggling or barely surviving anymore. That digital piece is not getting adopted the way we thought. It's not transforming the business the way we thought that it would. And so we started asking a lot of questions of a lot of different people, not all of them clients. Whenever we could find someone who'd succeeded or failed, we tried to compare the two. And that led us to do a lot of research. And the cool thing about the research is ultimately it resulted in identifying 5 principles for transformation that the successful have adopted and those who struggle haven't. And as I say this, I'm going to say, first of all, it's easy to pay lip service to, yes, we do those 5 things, and still struggle. The people who take it really, really seriously and go deep with it, they're the ones who tend to actually experience a lot of success. The really cool thing, though, is these 5 principles are principles about people centricity that have been around for years. They're timeless, really, for many, many years, millennia. They've always been true. The way we deal with them is a little different because of digital, but as people-connected people, which most of us are if you're working in nonprofit, the basis is there. It's just that we're building on top of that foundation a little bit differently now. So let's dive in and talk about the 5 things. The first one is listening. Look, we all know the foundation for every good human relationship starts with listening and remembering, right? You start by listening to other people and remembering what they say, storing it up here in this computer between your ears. In the corporate world, in the organizational world, in the business world, listening and remembering, it's about data and content, right? It's about saying, lots of different voices are talking to me, and now I need a corporate memory. I need one place everybody can go to hear all the things that our customers and our volunteers and our other people are telling us that we need to be able to respond to. But the problem with that is we have too many places to go. Research from Microsoft suggests that the average knowledge worker, someone who has to spend a lot of time filtering through information in email or on their computer, has to use about 25 applications per week to get their jobs done. And it's absolutely overwhelming. Harvard Business Review encapsulates the problem this way. They said the average employee in this country, in the United States, spends 19% of their time each week looking for the information they need to get their job done. That's 1 day per week. That's almost 3 months per year. The people are looking for stuff. Now that might not sound very believable, but the next time you sit down and say, where was that email? Where was that grant proposal? Where was that? And you start asking people about it and interrupting them and emailing them and searching different places for it, start to think about how that magnifies across all the people in your organization because of all these different brains we have, all these different places that we hear. And in fact, our own research that we did a few years ago suggests strongly that this doesn't just impact productivity, it impacts satisfaction. One of our clients put it to us perfectly one day. We were invited in as a recovery project, so they were already struggling with something. And they said, look, we felt like every day we were marching up a mountain, taking this hill for leadership, right? We love where we work, we love our leadership, and we were doing what they said. And on our backs, we had backpacks full of rocks. And each of those rocks had the name of some piece of technology we had to use to get our jobs done. And someone in leadership came with a rock that said SharePoint on it and said, hey, we bought this to help you. And they put it in the backpack and didn't take anything out. How is that supposed to help us? That's how our people feel, right? The more places they have to go, the more they feel like you're actually dehumanizing me by making me use all these systems. You're making me do stuff that is not my unique humanness. It's something a computer should do for me. So what do? Well, first of all, the answer that we found from the most successful is you do not say, we're shutting stuff down and we're going to listen in fewer places. Our customers, our volunteers, our people that we exist to serve, our donors, they're all connecting with us on different channels. And we need to connect to them on all those different places. Now, every channel may not be relevant for every organization, but you need to connect on all the right ones. You can't listen in fewer places. You have to listen in those ones that worked in the past, maybe with the older folks that you serve who say, I'm still more comfortable getting a letter in the mail or a phone call or an email. That makes me feel old because that's how I still prefer to communicate. But my kids, like, they don't know how to spell email, right? It's all text messaging for them. We've got to connect to them across all those different places. But the successful have said what we really need to do is we need to remember in fewer. We got to figure out how to bring all of that together so when our people go to get their job done, they don't have to go to all those different places. They've got one brain, many ears, but one brain, one place that remembers all of that information. So here's how one organization approached it. I call this a ride-along case study because it has a lot to do with listening. So this was a regional bank, and they looked at this and said, first of all, let's sit down and let's do a roadmap. And they decided up front, we're going to do an annual plan too. We do a business annual plan every year. We're going through this transformation. All we know is what we know a year from now is going to look radically different than what we know today. So let's not try to put a plan together and think it's done in a year or two and just work the plan. Let's have an annual plan that we come back with. And the basis of that first plan they did was this. They said, after they'd evaluated everything, they said, we want less technology, but we want more solutions, and we're going to ride along. And what they meant by ride along was they said there is power in taking people and putting them together with the people that are getting work done, the people in the front lines of relationships in our organization. Let's get them to ride along with them. So as we engage with them every month, it was, we're going to ride along with this line of business. We're going to ride along with this person. Sometimes ride along was sitting in an office watching what they did on a computer. Sometimes it was literally getting in a car and riding along with them as they went and called on different people in the field. But we learned from that. And over 3 years, 153 processes have been automated, but systems have also been consolidated. You look over here in this diagram, here's all the systems they were using to get their jobs done 3 years ago. They're gradually doing more and more, but with less and less. So they've got more solutions working, they're doing more listening, but they're not having to go as many places to get it done. They don't need a solution for every single thing they do. They have a few solutions that do a lot of different things. It's easier for their people to learn. It's easier for their IT group to support. Even their outsourced IT people do a better job with them on it.
Hey, Geoff, it's Jennifer. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Hallelujah.
Hey,
Okay.
yay.
Yay. So if you guys are seeing me and I'm like, what screen am I looking at? It's because I set up 2 additional computers and I've got everything in front of me. So anyway, but listen, here's what I wanted to do. If you could go back to that
Sure.
slide that we were just on a second ago. You know, one of the things that hits me when I look at this, and I'd like for you to speak to a little bit. So if I'm in the nonprofit space, which I am, and I look at this and say 153 business processes, how did they even know that? How did they even get to that point? So that's one question.
Great, yep.
How do I figure this out? And then secondly, can I take something like this this seems really big to me because it's a regional bank. Can I take that and distill it down to something that I, in the nonprofit space, can digest and implement? So 2 questions that may not be quick answers, but there you have it. Great
questions. I'll try to answer them pretty succinctly and can always follow up afterwards too. So very good questions. And you'll see at the end of this, I'll talk about prison fellowship, which may be bigger than some, smaller than others who are on the line, I don't know, with some of the same things. So first of all, to answer the first question, they did not know they had 153 business processes up front. They did not know they had 153 business processes even after they had done the roadmap. What they essentially did up front was they did some planning to say, let's get a general idea of some of the processes that are low-hanging opportunities for us to improve, and let's understand what this diagram over here kind of looks like, right? How are we getting our work done in general? And so then they gradually put together annual plans saying, we think we can get rid of this and this over here and do those things over here. And then as they implemented the plan, essentially every month there was another ride along. And ride along comes from the motorcycle industry, where Harley Davidson back in the early 80s, right after they kind of bought themselves back from AMF bowling, they looked around and said, we're sitting in a corporate boardroom trying to decide what to do as a business, and our customers are out there. Let's get on motorcycles and let's ride along with them, because that is a great way to listen to what's actually going on. So part of the strategy for this bank was, we don't know what all the answers are, because we don't even know what all the problems are. We don't know what all the processes are. So every month we're going to ride along with somebody. So no matter how big you are, just spending time getting the right person to spend time with the right other person. So the right person means you want that frontline subject matter expert who's living with something every day. And if you went to them and said, how can I use technology to make your life easier? They might go, I have no idea. I don't like technology. I don't want technology to make my life easier. And you get that person who's able to relationally connect, but also understands what's available out there and looks at someone and says, what you just did right then I can make that go twice as fast for you, and you don't even know how to ask for it, right? You don't know what you don't know, you're in this box. So it revealed itself to them as they went on. And then as they did subsequent annual plans, they could come back and say, let's take stock of everything we've learned this year, because now we're realizing we can do things we weren't even dreaming about doing just a few months ago. So that's the answer to that question. And I'm not sure if I answered the other question or not.
You actually did within the context of that broader answer, because you really hit on a couple of key things. Number one, the folks that were asking to figure things out, as you said, they didn't know they had 153 business processes, but they had a partner come alongside to help have a conversation. And I think the beauty of what you said is those things began to be revealed as they went through the ride-alongs and the plans and so on and so forth. So I think that's the takeaway. This is an evolutionary process, and you have to start somewhere. Where do you start? Right where you are,
Right.
with a buddy or a partner, and then you map it out in stages as you go. Did I say that the right way?
I think you said it very well. I mean, the new term for it is agility, right? And the reality is, if you try to do a plan where you say, I figured out everything, and here's all the things I'm going to do over 2 years to solve this, I guarantee you'll get 6 months into that plan and say, throw out everything we were going to do for the next 18 months because now we've learned some new things, or the world has changed or something, and we need to respond to that. So it's better to kind of have a fairly loose plan and the agility to say, we're going to modify as we go on, and then we're going to have plan times for these guys annually to get above the weeds and say, are we still going in the right direction? What has changed? What have we learned? What do we do different? Go back down into the weeds and keep working.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great questions. Okay, so the second of the 5 things that we found is, it's like Stephen Covey says, right? We don't just listen, we have to understand. What Covey said was, our problem as humans is not really that we don't listen, but we tend to listen with the intent to respond rather than with the intent to truly understand, right? That's the human skill, is how do we get where somebody else is? And I'm guessing a lot of the folks who are on the phone probably have that skill already, but how do we institutionalize that? What does that look like when we get into a larger and larger organization with more and more people, right? As soon as you add 2 or 3 more people, it starts to get a little more difficult. Well, in an organization, that's the analytics step, right? We've listened, we've put that information into fewer places that we can get to it. Now we need to understand all of that information. This research from IBM, where they interviewed 1,500 executives in the largest companies in the globe, they said the companies that are growing fastest at the highest levels of revenue, so it was not nonprofit focused, but they actually all differentiate themselves from everyone else with 3 things. They're better at accessing data, they're better at getting insights out of that data, and they're better at translating those insights into action. So it kind of speaks to a culture of how do we use numbers in a world where we want to be people first, but we also need to use numbers to help run our organization. So what does that look like? Well, the word that you hear all the time is big data, right? And data is big. It's getting bigger and bigger all the time. So this illustration shows, how much data there was available to us in the world years ago and some years into the future. It's growing exponentially. In fact, almost any organization, if you look at them today, you can say 2 years from now, you'll have more than double the amount of information available, double the amount of bits of data available to you 2 years from now than you have today. So how do we manage all that information? But here's the part that almost nobody talks about, and that is most of that information is bad. It's what we call ROTI. So most data in your system, somewhere between 50 and 80%, depending on what kind of organization you are, is bad. It's redundant, outdated, trivial, inaccurate, or incomplete. And again, you can probably go, whether it's paper-based or whether it's electronic, you can go and say, oh, I just did a search for the holiday calendar. And wait a minute, that's the 2013 holiday calendar. That's not the one that I want, right? I want the one that I want. So what's going on behind that claim, and what do we do about it? Well, first of all, start simpler. We tend to kind of look at it and go, oh my gosh, let's go buy some kind of data analysis tool to really analyze all this data we have. Well, if half the data you have is bad, a data analysis tool is going to help you make bad decisions faster, right? That's not what you need to do. So the experts, the ones who are really succeeding at this, have said, first of all, we have a content and a data management plan. And I'll share a couple of analogies or stories of how that actually works in a second. So it's not just we're dumping data in here, but we also have a way to govern that to make sure it stays clean. It's not going to be perfect, but clean. And then we have a data steward. So one of the things we used to hear in years past was the cleanliness of data is everyone's job. And we were working with a law firm a couple of years ago. Somebody in the law firm, as we were talking about this issue they had with a bunch of bad data, they said, you know what I think we should do? I think we should do our data the way we do our office cleaning. Everybody take a turn to clean the toilets and empty the refrigerator. And someone's, we don't do that. Are you crazy? There wouldn't be anybody working here in a couple of months if we did that. And they said, that's exactly right. And why are we trying to do that with our data? We're taking our most important assets and we're giving them administrative work when there are people who are actually cut out to do this work, who should be doing this work for us. So they came up with a strategy to partially insource, partially outsource all of that, and to keep things clean. So they didn't turn into hoarders like this lady is right here, because we're all digital hoarders today. It's so much easier to say, just stick that away somewhere. I might need it someday. And it's difficult to say, how do I go back and clean that out? So what does some of that look like? Let's start super simple with a couple of quick stories here. Bigger organization, but this idea of just being social. So how do we actually help to understand each other through some of these new social tools that we have available to us today? There's some of the benefits of social right there, but here's some information from Atrium Health. I think most of you guys know who Atrium is. They're a big organization, but these analytics come from the usage of, for them, it's Microsoft Teams. It doesn't have to be Microsoft Teams, but that's what they use. And if you look at this, these analytics end right at the end of March of this year. And you can kind of see the number of chats that they were doing as COVID began to rise went off the charts. That's a little pink chart up front. All of a sudden, people said, we need to connect with each other in new ways. Now, they've taken the time to put a structure in place. Now it was available. And if you look at the bottom, that's teams. I don't think you teams created. You can see the number of teams that were created. These were Microsoft Teams to do stuff. Went off the charts again. February spike, March, huge spike. I don't have numbers since then. The other thing to notice about this is you need to have this available to help people engage socially. But the other thing to notice is those black bars at the bottom, that's how many teams were deleted. That was their governance policies around how do we clean up after ourselves. So they had people who looked at things and rules to follow to make sure we don't need 1,148 sites times 12 months a year of stuff to clean up. We need to kind of do some of the cleaning up after ourselves. And you can see because it had that structure in place, they actually created a ton of traction when people started to now say, we were kind of saying maybe later to this whole Teams and social and digital workplace thing. Now that COVID has hit, over the first 3 months of 2020, they provided more training for just Microsoft Teams than they provided for training across all assets in the prior 12 months before that. So giving people just the tools to engage socially, super helpful. Another quick case study on this, Cerner is an organization that was going through some growth, and as a growing organization that was decentralized, they struggle with a lot of what we struggle with. Their ability for people to understand and align with the mission was falling off. And this goes back a few years. You can see this was between 2014 and 2015. They suddenly found that people were kind of not aligned well with the organization's mission or strategy. Their solution to it was a digital solution. So they essentially rolled out some digital communication tools to say, how can we connect with our people in a way that helps us to connect with people across a globally, a geographically distributed organization? We are all geographically distributed now. If we weren't 3 months ago, we are now because we don't have offices as much. We may be starting to reunite, we may not. We don't know what the future holds, but we can all learn a lesson from what Cerner did to say, we can use these tools to drive communication a little differently. The third area, once people have listened and understood where you build relationships, is connecting, right? Connecting is where the action is. But connecting isn't really what people often think the action is. So when you look at people who are great at connecting with other people and you watch them closely, they may not articulate it this way, but they do things habitually. There are certain things that they've done that they started to realize, this helps me to build and flourish human relationships. Those things we call habits in people. In business, those are things we call processes. How well do processes work in a people-first organization? every one of the processes you see here is a people first process. A lot of people are skeptical of, look, if we try to get process around people, is that just going to kind of, straitjacket them and we're going to lose the value of relationships? Not if you do it right. If you do it wrong, absolutely. There are downside risks of it too. But I love that second one right there, by the way, of all these metrics. I love this one from MIT research. People in your organization who have an above average number of connections just generate more revenue. It's not by any intentionality or anything like that. It's just the more people I know, the more revenue my department, my team, my organization tends to generate. So what's the difference then? How do we create process around people? Here's what we found. People tend to err on two sides. They either say, this is about people and it should be flexible. There are no processes. It's the Wild West. Every person for themselves, just get people with the right skills. Then you get the other side that says, look, I've been doing process design for a long time. I set up our accounting and IT systems or whatever it was. And so I've developed processes and they're like train tracks. They're very rigid. There's very little variance side to side. And what you really need for modern processes that are people first, but that leverage digital, is some rigidity, a core, because if it's a process, it should be repeatable and improvable, but it's got a flexible edge. It recognizes that don't take away the human factor, don't take away what makes us unique as human beings, but instead unleash people to be their unique human selves, but give them some structure to do that within so that things happen in a predictable way. Well, what does that mean? Give me some examples of that. So for one thing, it means just how you think about designing process looks different. This is called a journey map. It's not a one size fits all for everybody, but the way we documented processes in the past, they tend to be flow charts, right? It's like this happens, straight arrow this, maybe there's an if statement and there's two arrows coming out of it, but it's all very structured. Whereas a journey map or a modern design thinking process says different people are different. We can't control what they're going to do. Different things are going to happen. We're prepared for a variety of scenarios, and we arm our people with the principles and the rules to help them respond to that, but not the rigid structure that says you must always do things a certain way. So here's how one organization did this. This is proposal generation, not unlike creating a grant or something like that. This particular organization was creating proposals. They were using something called Slack that some of you might be using, and it's a great solution, but they had kind of thrown it together pretty quickly in there, and they were having a lot of issues with it. As you might imagine, I don't know if you can relate to this or not, but every time someone created a proposal, they didn't go to the library of templates to get the right template. They went to the last proposal they wrote, which may or may not be aligned with the template they were actually supposed to use, and even if it was, it might now be out of date. Then they were saving them to different places with different file naming standards, and people are having to navigate to them. And in Slack, they would say, I'm done with my proposal. Can you go take a look at it and do your updates and all of those kinds of things? So very confusing, very disorganized, lots of risk. There were missing opportunities to get things done right, and it took a long time to get this done. They went out and they bought Microsoft Office, and that's when they contacted us and they said, look, we've got Microsoft Office and we've been using Slack to do this, so let's just move it over to Teams. And we kind of looked at it and said, you can do that because Slack and Teams are more or less pretty similar, but there's a better way to do this that gives a little more structure to it without too much. So inside of Teams, they joined something called Dynamic CRM, SharePoint, and a Power App. Some of you might know what that is. If you don't worry about it. Basically, they just said, let's create a list where we can keep a list of all of our customers and all of our proposals. And every time we need to create a new proposal, we just pop open a little form, easy to design. It did not take a developer to do this. And we can just put some information in here about who's the customer that this is, answer a few other questions about it, and then it kicks off a process. It's called a flow. Again, not super technical flow. Took a little technical expertise to do it, but not a developer, that then says, okay, based on these things you've answered, we can pick the right template. And now we're going to mail merge in the right data to fill out most of that template. Now we're going to save it in a standard place with a standard name, give you, the rep, a link to it to go finalize it because it's got to be flexible enough to vary with the specific circumstances. And now kick off a process to get it approved internally, all digitally focused so that it can take a few hours instead of a few days to push this entire thing through the process, and a dashboard to monitor all of that. So they got a tremendous amount of not just time savings, but also lowered risk and consistency with what they were doing as a result of doing things that way.
So Geoff, if I could hop in and make a point about what you just said there, because I think it's really important. A lot of our nonprofit partners are considering or have already made the move to Microsoft 365, to a cloud-based environment, and perhaps are just using one or two things. I'm going to say things, it might be an app, it might be a process, but things within O365 or MS365. I'm trying to update my language.
You and me both.
But what you're saying here, I think, is really critical. What I hear you saying is, hey, these guys came to us and they were trying to figure out a way how to tighten stuff up and using a new tool. And we were saying, you've got 365 right here. Let's leverage what you have to get to the goal where you're trying to get. Let's not overlay a whole nother tool or a whole nother something. Leverage what you have. Let's figure out how to make the best use of it. Am I summarizing that accurately?
Yeah, you're summarizing it well, and you bring up a couple of other points, but absolutely. I mean, oftentimes you tend to kind of say, well, there's a point solution, point solution meaning a piece of technology written to solve a specific problem.
Yes.
And it's tempting to go after that, right? It's like, well, I can just turn this one on and it works. Well, maybe, but now it operates outside of all that other stuff that we have. And you almost always want it to talk to those things, and getting two pieces of technology to talk to each other, that's often the most expensive part of setting up technology. So if you look at it, most of the time having a solution that's integrated and works together is better than having what I would call the best of breed solution. And you've got some pretty close to best of breed solutions in that Microsoft 365 suite. And I'm not here to promote it. You might have another suite that has some great stuff in it too. That just happens to be the space that we tend to live in. So that's one thing. The other extreme we see people sometimes go to is we call it the hammer and nail syndrome. It's kind of like, oh, we just got Microsoft 365 and we want to use Power Apps, so let's apply it to this. And it's kind of like, yeah, when you're walking around with a hammer looking to pound something into the ground, you might be better off with a screwdriver. So don't get a solution and look for an answer. Look at your problems and your struggles, and then look at the toolkit you have and say, what do we have in there that we can use to solve that?
I think that is an excellent takeaway. Survey the landscape before you, see if you can leverage it to address whatever the issues are that you've identified. I love that.
Thank you. Absolutely. Okay, the fourth principle that we ran into that, again, differentiate those who succeed from those that struggle, we call it the principle of knowing. And what it means is knowing the results and constantly improving. But the interesting thing is when you look at, again, human relationships, the best people at relating to other people, they go beyond instinct, right? They constantly fine tune. They're constantly learning. They're learning how well did I interact with this audience if I were addressing a board meeting, or how well did I interact with this one person, and how do I continue to learn and fine tune? How do I know the results I got, and how do I work to do better and better every time? In an organization, that means knowing the score, sharing the score, and giving every person on your team a voice in improving the score. That's what we've run into. And we actually call this the collaboration principle, because knowing the score is pretty hard. We'll talk a little bit about that. Sharing the score, if you know it, not too hard. Giving everyone a voice, really, really challenging. So although it's about continuous improvement, it's about getting the whole team engaged in the continuous improvement. That's where the magic starts to happen. That's where the ones who are succeeding are doing the best. What kind of results do you get when you do that well? This research from Deloitte is really compelling around, if you have a learning and collaborative culture, you tend to get a lot of really great results. But it's not an easy button, right? If we could all just say, tomorrow we'll become this culture, we'd all be there already. It takes time to do it. And it takes a lot of constant attention to it as well. And regardless of the industry type, I see all sorts of organizations struggle to make this happen. It's not that they intentionally say we don't want to, it's just not easy to make it happen. How much of a struggle is it? According to the authors of this book, Boundary Spanning Leadership, when business leaders were asked how critical things were to their organization, 86% said collaboration is the most critical thing. If I can get my people to work together well, that's going to help define the future of this organization. And then they said, how good are you at it? 7% said that they're good at doing this. So a whopping 79% gap between how important this is and how well we execute on it. So how can we start to use digital to maybe help us close this gap? And I think that's one of the cool things, right? We're finally talking about collaborative digital tools instead of just business process automation digital tools. And they certainly overlap a little bit. So here's a story of how one organization did it. This is a winery based in California. And one of the things they looked at was they said, look, we want to engage our people in this process. And so with them, we actually rolled out something called Know Your Squag. You guys might have heard of a BHAG. It goes back a few years ago to Tom Peters coined the term. It was big, hairy, audacious goal. And the biggest one of all time, or the most famous one of all time, was put a person on the moon and bring them back home safely by the end of the decade of the 60s. And everyone said, oh my gosh, you know, we can't even get one in outer space. Russia's way ahead of us. We're not going to be able to do it. But lo and behold, people rallied around the goal and it came to life. So BHAGs still important. They still have a place. But we have changed a lot as cultures, as businesses, and as human beings. Our attention span has shrunk by something like 30% over the last decade. Literally, we have an 8-second attention span. Goldfish have 9-second attention spans. So I hope you guys are still listening to me. We need to be stimulated, right? Every few seconds. Look, I'm more guilty than anybody. When my wife sit and binge on a TV show or two in the evening, what's in my lap? This guy is in my lap. And what do? If you dare to bore me for a nanosecond, I got this out, and I'm going to check something out on here, right? I got something else going on. Super short attention spans overall. A squag is a small, quickly attainable goal. Squag, small, quickly attainable goal. So the idea of a squag is the person with the goal has 100% control over meeting the goal. So the goal is not something like, we need to raise fundraising by 20%. That's a goal too, but I don't have 100% control over it. I can control the activities that lead to that goal. So I can say, all right, well, I need to write X more grants per year, or I need to go on this many more networking meetings per year, or whatever it is. So they came up with a squag for every team. This squag was for their sales team. And their sales team actually helped to develop the squag. So it wasn't leadership saying, here is what your squag is going to be. It was getting together collaboratively and saying, here's what we need to do as an organization for our bottom line. We all agree to this. What do you think you can do, and how can we measure it? One of the things they said was, look, we sell a lot of wine in restaurants, and we know the more physical in-person visits we make to a location, the more wine we sell into those places. It's just basic relationship building. There's a lot of other nuances, but that's where we're going to start. So they said, okay, now if you look at this chart, the red line on this chart, that was their current level of performance. They said, okay, that's about, as a team, that's how many of these we do. That's the other part of the squag. You don't set the goal as a person. Ideally, you set the goal as a team. And the entire team wins or loses together, right? So I don't set a goal as Geoff Ables to say, hey, my squag is, my BHAG is lose 20 pounds. But my squag is raise my heart rate by 20 minutes at least 4 times per week. But if I get together with my buddy, I say, between us, we're going to raise our heart rate for 20 minutes 8 times a week. And if I do 5 and you do 3, we still win, right? But if I do 5 and you do 2, I'm going to be encouraging you to kind of up your game a little bit. We're going to go after a goal together. It's not a unique goal. The green bar was what they said, that's our goal. That's where we want our performance to change to be from then on. And the blue dotted line, that's their actual performance after they set the goal. Can you see the power of getting together to do this, right? They're actually able to see, they quickly shot above the green line. They hit it a couple of times in the future, and they did go below it once after they lost 2 key people in the slow time of year. So that was kind of an anomaly. They permanently changed the behavior of their team by doing this. By the way, this is showing up in Teams. Again, it doesn't have to be Teams. It can be some other tool, but this is showing up in Teams, and it's a business intelligence type of report. And behind the scenes, because they had a decentralized sales team that didn't meet together all that often, they could actually do conversations about this together with each other and encourage each other along the lines of meeting the squag together, even though they couldn't physically be with each other.
That's a huge point right now in time, right? Because we are physically separated. That's yeah. And a lot of our listeners are either debating or are already using Teams. So take note, listeners.
Absolutely. And again, if you're using Slack, you can do essentially the same thing with it. And you don't have to, if you don't have a BI tool, use Excel. There's no magic to it. You use the tools that you've got, maybe gradually expand on them if you need to. But yeah, I mean, they were decentralized. We're all decentralized now. But I think we also are tending to focus on some of what we're doing with digital right now around chat and around video calls. And those are important, obviously on the rise tremendously. But remember, there's other things we can now incorporate into that too to help people think differently about how they get work done. And especially when you've got a sales team, believe me, they're about the least analytically focused group of people you would ever meet. Other than, did I get my commission? They're going to be very focused on that. But those other analytics, they don't. But when you put something like this together, and we did little awards and stuff like that, all of a sudden you created passion and energy around it, especially since they owned the goal, right? It wasn't leadership. It was like, hey, we got together. Leadership might have filtered a few out, but they got together and said, here's our top 2 or 3. Let's vote on them. Let's select them. Let's do them. And by the way, they change those goals every 3 to 6 months now too. So they change behavior permanently. Now move on to the other goal, right? There's so many analogies to getting ourselves into physical shape versus getting our organizations transformed into a new kind of shape as well. So those 4 things: listen, understand, connect, and know. That's kind of where we were a number of years ago as we went through this process. And we said, hey, when organizations are powered by luck, when they really do these things well, they tend to get this digital transformation. They tend to still be people-centric or more people-centric than ever when they do these things. But we were still struggling. There was something we could see. Some companies we kind of started articulating this. We put plans together around this. And some companies just got it and ran with it. And some improved, but they just struggled. It just seemed to be mechanical. It didn't seem to come from a place of authenticity, if that makes sense. And so, like so many of the other things that we've discovered, it really came to us through the benefit of a relationship with a client. When we were in the boardroom with them once, new client, they were very successful. I'm very successful with implementing being powered by luck. They were just taking to it and they were getting great results. And we took a break, and a couple of us from my company were just left in the conference room, and we were chatting about them and how well it was going. And someone looked up at the wall and said, they got a great mission. We took a look at the mission statement. I should have taken a picture. I don't remember all the details, but it was basically like, if we treat our vendors this way, we're going to be successful. And if we treat our distributors, that was manufactured, this way, we're going to be successful. And if we treat our suppliers this way, we're going to be successful. And if we help with customers this way, and if we treat employees this way, we're going to be successful. And by the way, if we do all these things well, we're going to make money. And it was interesting. You kind of looked at it and said, there's not much about money in their mission. There's a lot about people in their mission. And we scratched our heads and said, is that maybe what we're missing? And I'm a numbers guy, so I kind of struggled with that until somebody said, well, let me show you some numbers then. So we've looked at a lot of numbers for this, but there are many, many numbers that go on to prove that an integrity-based organization is a more successful one. They tend to take the long view, so they're not daily always more successful, but they tend to thrive over the long haul. And by the way, there's some other research that suggests organizations that pay lip service to integrity are less successful than ones that just don't even bother, right? There's a lot of them. Organizations that spend time saying, we have a lot of integrity, oftentimes are the ones that don't. They're just trying to convince everybody that they do. And the evidence is, it's probably better to not even say it. In fact, it's almost better to say, if you live it, that's more important than articulating it. So interesting to see here when you look at it. It's more about what would your people say about you as a leader and your organization than what would you as a leader articulate that your culture should be, right? So it's your brand. The other piece of this that we found, by the way, so we called this principle good luck. So one way we think of it is luck is what you do. Listen, understand, connect, and know. Good luck, it's why you do it. It's your purpose, right? So if things come from a purpose, it tends to just be more authentic, more automatic. It's like, well, of course we're going to do this because this is who we are. And this is a new tool we can use to be better at being who we are versus a tool that focuses more on how can we get stuff? How can we just get results? How can we get more out of our people and our customers without really thinking about why we exist as an organization and as people? That tends to be out of alignment with each other. Another thing we ran into was this that I found very interesting, much more recent, and that is it's really important for leadership and management to fully embrace digital to be successful with it. And what I mean by that is, this is from Harvard Business Review, management and leadership need to work on becoming digital natives the way younger people are digital natives. The way a lot of managers and leaders look at it is, look, I bought that thing for you, and it is a gift to you to use to do whatever you want to do better. But look, I'm 50 something, 60 something, and I'm uncomfortable with this stuff. And I'm saying that because I'm in that category. And so, I don't need to adopt it. I'm going to kind of be the relationship guy. So you can do that. But according to this information from Harvard Business Review and from what we've seen anecdotally, you're not going to be as successful with it. There's an absolute bottom line improvement when leaders use this to get better at being leaders. When they look at digital, not as a tool for the end user or the front line, but as a management tool and as a leadership tool, it absolutely begins to make a difference. Here's one case study for how that made a difference. I know we're coming up. Can I go a few minutes over? Okay.
Yes, we can. Anybody that needs to drop off, feel free to. We're approaching 1 minute before the hour, but yes, we are going to wrap up shortly. If you need to drop off, we understand.
And if you'd like to circle back, happy to answer questions. So this is Isis Gonzalez. She's an amazing teenage girl. She's a gifted athlete on the cross country team and a really beautiful singing voice. And like many girls in her culture, Isis was really looking forward to celebrating her quinceañera, which is a special birthday. But Isis was going to be celebrating that birthday without her mother because her mother was in prison. And so Isis was going into that as a jaded kid, kind of a little bit of a cast out, bearing a lot of shame from her mother because of her mother, and not engaging as well as she would have otherwise been doing, and very much out of touch with her mother. Her mother had been transferred to a prison far away, and although her mother loved her, she just hadn't been able to communicate with her the way she wanted to. Now, a lot of kids are in that situation. 1 in 14 kids have a parent in prison. 1 in 14 are living with shame. 1 in 14 have a huge strike against their future that they're really struggling with. But for Isis, the story ends much better because you see Prison Fellowship, it's a nonprofit. They have an organization called Angel Tree. And through Angel Tree, somebody who cared about kids and those in prison helped make the connection. And so on Isis's birthday, they delivered to Isis just a t-shirt as a I love you gift from her mother. And Isis wore that t-shirt proudly to her cross-country meets for many, many months to come. And it changed her relationship. Isis is grown now. She has a postgraduate degree. Her mother's out of prison. They have a great relationship. And she's engaging with those in prison, showing them love as well. So that comes out of this idea of purpose. And so when Prison Fellowship looked at employing a digital workplace within their organization, they said, this is a cultural tool. So when they do, there's a process for kind of evaluating what are our principles, what are our goals for this. They didn't say productivity and efficiency and communication. Those were further down on the list. This is a tool to promote a better culture within our organization. And how did that go? So much more connected through everything that they were doing with their culture. And they even to the point that they get these kinds of unsolicited comments from people who come in and either started using the new tools when they rolled out or joined the organization and said, I'm connecting to people in ways I've never connected to people in an organization before. All of this came before COVID. These were just people coming into an organization saying, I joined, and they kind of shared a little personal story about me on your intranet. And the CEO put a comment on there saying, you like to fish? I like to fish too. Where have you been fishing most recently? And all of a sudden I'm engaged with people who, practically speaking, they don't have the time to come chat with me every day, but I'm building relationships that I just wouldn't have had if it weren't for digital. Now, more recently, they've gone through a lot of changes due to COVID. So the really cool thing about this for them is Prison Fellowship had about 20% of their team was what I would call corporate. They all worked in the DC office for the most part. And about 80% were field all over the country, going into prisons and raising funds and all of those kinds of things. And, they cared for each other, but they weren't well connected. Because of this, now those people who they were really struggling getting them to adopt the digital tools because they're out in the field, they're gung-ho about the digital tools. And there's more connection now between home office and remote offices than there ever has been. And they've put a lot of really cool things out there to give them tips on just how to engage or how to survive the crisis, and just sharing personal things that people weren't taking the time to share before. They're getting to know people around the digital water cooler as well as if it were a physical water cooler, maybe even better in some cases. So summarizing, I know we're just past time, but if I try to take everything I just said and put it into a few key terms, listen, understand, connect, know, and good luck. These are the things that it's all about. If you can do these 5 things better, what we have found is every time organizations have taken their plan and held it up to this and said, how is it helping us do these 5 things better? They absolutely improve the results that they're getting. Instead of just saying, this is a cool tool, let's get it, or someone asked for it, how is it helping us change how we do and who we are becoming every day? So we call that becoming powered by luck. And the way we put it is this, it's a balance, right? Look, the pulse of every organization, the thing that enables us to do what we do, it's funding, right? For profit world, it's profit. For the nonprofit world, it might be funding. Funding is the pulse, right? Without a pulse, it's really important. Without a pulse, we're not here anymore. But look, if someone stops you on the road and says, Geoff, how you doing today? You don't go, oh, hang on a second. 70 beats per minute. I'm doing great, right? You don't answer the question. We don't live for a pulse. A pulse is what just is keeping us alive. We live for people. And digital can bring both of those worlds closer together, holding both of those things in balance. So I do have a couple of freebies for you guys too. If you like the luck principle, you can go grab the book on Amazon, and I've got a few copies. If you're super resource constrained and you want a copy, let me know and I'll just drop one in the mail to you. But I've got a couple of ebooks I can send you too. So one is on digital workplace ROI. So just some of the metrics around what's the return on investment for going more digital. And if you are one of those organizations that has teams and you're kind of struggling with it and you want a little guide to help you, we've got a Teams deployment ebook. Just email me at that email address. Happy to get you a copy of that. I'll send you copies of both of those items. And of course, we're in the business of doing this. If you need to jump on a call for a few minutes just to chat about something, please do. We're not going to worry about the cost. If we can help you guys be more effective and successful, we'd love to do that. If it turns into something bigger, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Geoff, this has been such helpful information. What you've helped us do is put a framework around these activities that we've been engaging in, generally speaking, in the community, and that is, how do we figure out the best way to leverage digital? And there's a lot of language, a lot of models, a lot of ideas, but what I like about this is it's very approachable, it uses plain English, and it's something that we can translate and understand very quickly. And you know, guys, for the listening audience, this is what Geoff is presenting to you is what makes our skilled volunteer activities so rich and valuable. Without experts like Geoff offering these things to us, then we're somewhat resource strapped, right, in the way of expertise. So I just really appreciate your willingness to share your time, your ideas, and to offer up the ability for folks to have a conversation with you about these things and at least get a dialogue started. And for those of you who may not feel comfortable doing that, you know you can reach out to Aparo, and we serve as an intermediary and help facilitate. We help access skilled volunteers, find the right experts, and then facilitate a project to help you achieve your goals. So again, I really appreciate your time, your expertise, and your generosity of spirit. It's what makes the world go round, and I feel very lucky that we can call you a friend to Aparo. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and appreciate everybody else showing up. There's some very nice comments put in a little chat box over there too. Thank you, everybody. I am happy to do it. I come from some nonprofit background and have a heart for what's going on out there. So if I've made some sort of small contribution today, I count that as a big win.
Great.
Thanks, Geoff. This was really, really awesome. I took lots of notes.
Yay.
I want to read more.
And guys, as you know, what we'll do after today is any resources that we have available, links and whatnot, we'll post all that stuff for you within about 24 hours. And then that way you'll have the ability to access those resources. And if for some reason you can't get your hands on them, then you just give us a call or shoot us an email and we'll get you connected. Yeah?
Sounds terrific.
All right, guys, with that, we're going to thank you for your time and attention today. We sure do appreciate you joining in. I hope you got some great tips, and reach out to us if you have questions or comments. And I hope we see you next week for our next event.
Bye-bye.
Everybody have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.
Geoff, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.